My birthday dinner was already cold by the time I accepted the truth. Not a single member of my family was coming. The candles had burned, so low that wax spilled across the cake, like tiny white tears. Around me, empty chairs stood neatly arranged, each one waiting for someone who had promised, smiled and sworn they would be there. My phone remained silent until I finally gave in and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, laughing in the background while music and conversation echoed behind her. "Oh," she chuckled casually. "We had something more important to do." Those 8 words landed harder than any scream ever could. I stared through the restaurant window as families celebrated together, children hugging their parents, grandparents raising glasses, everyone making memories I thought I deserved just once a year. The waiter approached quietly, asking if he should wrap the untouched food. I nodded because speaking suddenly felt impossible. For years, I had been the reliable child, the one who remembered birthdays, paid bills when emergencies happened, drove relatives to appointments, and never complained when my own plans were sacrificed for theirs. Every holiday seemed to revolve around someone else's happiness, and I convinced myself that eventually my turn would come. Instead, my birthday became just another inconvenience they felt comfortable ignoring. I didn't argue with my mother. I didn't beg her to come. I didn't remind her of every promise she'd broken. I simply ended the call, paid the bill, and walked into the cool, evening air with a strange sense of calm, replacing the hurt. That night, instead of posting about disappointment, I uploaded a smiling photo from the restaurant. The empty chairs stayed carefully outside the frame. My caption was short: "Grateful to spend my birthday with the people who truly showed me what family means." I didn't tag anyone, I didn't accuse anyone, simply pressed post 3. Hours later, my parents were pounding on my front door, furious. Not because they had abandoned me on my birthday, but because the world had started asking why they weren't in the picture. Their anger told me something I had needed to understand for years. They weren't worried about hurting me. They were terrified that everyone else had finally noticed. I'm the oldest child in my family, though you would never know it by the way I was treated. Responsibility always found me first, but respect somehow never did. If something needed fixing, I was the one they called. If someone needed money, a ride, or a last-minute favor, my phone rang without fail. Yet when it came to celebrations, recognition, or simple appreciation, I seemed to disappear. Growing up, I convinced myself that being dependable was enough to earn love. Every birthday card I bought, every holiday dinner I helped prepare, every sacrifice I made felt like another deposit into an emotional account I believed would eventually be returned. It never was. My parents praised my younger siblings for ordinary achievements while expecting extraordinary effort from me, without so much as a thank you whenever I hinted that something felt unfair. I was told I was too sensitive, or reminded that family should never keep score. So I stopped speaking up. It was easier to smile, carry the weight, and pretend disappointment didn't sting. Over time, silence became my survival skill. Friends often asked why. I kept trying so hard for people who rarely returned the effort. I always defended my family. I told myself they were busy, distracted, or simply bad at expressing affection. Deep down, though, I noticed the pattern. They remembered everyone else's milestones with enthusiasm, but treated mine like an optional appointment they could cancel without guilt. By the time my birthday arrived that year, I wasn't expecting perfection. I wasn't asking for expensive gifts or a grand celebration. I only wanted the people who claimed to love me to keep one simple promise: show up. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't waiting for a birthday party. I was waiting for proof that I mattered to them as much as they mattered to me. That proof never came, and the silence around my empty table said more than words ever could. The days leading up to my birthday should have warned me, but I had spent so many years excusing my family's behavior that I ignored every sign. When I mentioned the dinner reservation in our family group chat, my message disappeared beneath conversations about my brother's weekend plans and my cousin's new car. No one acknowledged it. Hours later, my mother sent a recipe she wanted everyone to try, and suddenly the chat came alive with replies. A few days before my birthday, I called my father to confirm the time. He sounded distracted, as if he had answered in the middle of something more interesting. "We'll be there," he said after a brief pause, his voice carrying just enough hesitation to make me uneasy. Before I could say anything else, He ended the call with a quick excuse about being busy. When the day finally arrived, I reserved a private table at the small restaurant where we had celebrated birthdays. For years, the staff greeted me warmly because they remembered my family from past gatherings. One waitress smiled and asked, "Is everyone coming soon?" I looked at the empty entrance and answered, "They should be, every few minutes." I checked the door whenever it opened. Each time strangers walked in instead. Couples laughed together. Children ran toward balloons tied near another table. The sounds of glasses, clinking, and birthday songs from neighboring parties filled the room while my own table remained painfully untouched. I sent a polite message asking if anyone was running late. My mother read it without replying. My sister reacted with a thumbs-up emoji nearly 20 minutes later, but no explanation followed. My brother posted photos online from what looked like a family gathering somewhere else. They were all together, smiling comfortably, while I sat alone waiting for people who had already chosen not to come. That was the moment. Something inside me changed. The disappointment didn't explode into anger. It settled quietly, like a door closing forever. I realized I was no longer waiting for my family to arrive. I was watching the last excuse I had ever made for them disappear. I stared at my brothers' photos for a long time before locking my phone. There they were, my parents, my siblings, even a few relatives, smiling around a table covered with food. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had simply decided something else deserved their time more than I did. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what I had done wrong. The answer was painfully simple. Nothing. I paid the restaurant bill, thanked the staff for their kindness, and carried the untouched birthday cake to my car. During the drive home, I expected to feel devastated, but instead I felt strangely calm. The hurt was still there, but it had settled into something clearer. Years of excuses, second chances, and quiet forgiveness had finally reached their limit. When I walked into my house, I placed the cake on the kitchen counter and looked at the decorations I had spent hours putting up. They no longer felt like symbols of rejection. They became a reminder that I had continued, showing up for people who never felt obligated to do the same for me. That was when I made my decision. I wasn't going to call again. I wasn't going to send angry messages or demand an apology. People who truly cared didn't need to be convinced to care. Instead, I opened my social media app, chose the happiest photo I had taken before anyone failed to arrive, and wrote one quiet sentence beneath it. Thankful for the people who always make me feel like family. I knew exactly what I meant. I also knew they would read it very differently. I didn't post that photo to embarrass anyone. I posted it because it was the first honest boundary I had ever drawn without explaining myself. The picture showed me smiling beside my birthday cake, the restaurant lights glowing warmly behind me. What it didn't show were the empty chairs just outside the frame or the 2 hours I had spent waiting. Then I closed the app and went to bed. By morning, my phone was filled with notifications. Friends, coworkers, and neighbors had flooded the comments with birthday wishes. Several people thanked the family they assumed had organized the celebration. I didn't correct them, and I didn't encourage the misunderstanding. I simply replied, "Thank you," to everyone who had taken a moment to think of me. I also resisted the temptation to check whether my parents had seen the post. I knew they eventually would. My family cared deeply about appearances, especially in our small community, where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. They could ignore my feelings for years, but they hated even the possibility that someone might question the image of our close-knit family. So, I went about my day as usual. I answered work emails, finished my projects, and kept my phone on silent. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting to see whether they would react to my pain or to the reflection of themselves they suddenly saw through everyone else's eyes. That difference mattered. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing their attention. I was quietly letting their own choices speak louder than anything I ever could. The knock came just after sunset. It wasn't hesitant or polite. 3 sharp bangs echoed through the house, followed by another impatient round before I even reached the door. Through the window, I could see my parents standing on the porch with tight expressions. My brother a step behind them, his arms folded across his chest. The moment I opened the door, my mother walked in without waiting for an invitation. "What? Were you trying to prove with that post?" she demanded, holding up her phone. People are calling us asking why we missed your birthday." I looked at the screen. It was the same smiling photo I had uploaded the night before. The caption hadn't changed. Neither had a single word in the comments. "I didn't mention any of you," I replied calmly. "You made us look like terrible parents," my father said, his voice low but tense. I met his eyes without raising mine. "No," I answered. I shared a birthday photo. The room fell quiet. For a moment, no one spoke because there was nothing they could argue with. I hadn't lied. I hadn't accused them. I had simply refused to protect them from the consequences of their own decision. Brother finally broke the silence. "You knew what people would think." I knew people would see. Exactly what I posted. That answer lingered in the room longer than any accusation could have. My parents had expected tears, excuses, or another chance to explain themselves away. Instead, they found someone who no longer needed their approval. Watching them struggle to defend a story they had created for themselves was more satisfying than any argument. I could have won, sometimes. The strongest revenge isn't exposing the truth, it's quietly stepping aside and allowing it to reveal itself. After they left, the silence in my house felt different. It was no longer the lonely silence of waiting for people who never came. It was the peaceful silence that follows when you finally stop carrying a burden that was never yours. Over the next few days, the ripple effects spread quietly. Relatives who had seen my birthday post began reaching out, asking gentle questions instead of making assumptions. A few admitted they hadn't even known my family had skipped my celebration. Others simply wished me a happy birthday and changed the subject. But I could hear the disappointment in their voices. My parents suddenly found themselves explaining their choices over and over again. And for once, I wasn't the one covering for them. The biggest change happened inside our family. The constant requests for favors slowed. The casual expectation that I would always say yes seemed to disappear overnight. Whether it came from guilt or embarrassment, I couldn't say. I only knew that people started treating my time as if it had value. As for me, I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could sacrifice for others. I realized that loyalty without respect isn't love. It's convenience. That lesson reached far beyond one missed birthday. It reshaped every relationship in my life. If you've ever been the dependable person everyone leans on while forgetting to stand beside you, you know how easy it is to confuse being needed with being appreciated. They aren't the same thing. The moment I stopped protecting people from the consequences of their own actions, I finally started protecting myself. And that was the first birthday gift I'd received in years that truly changed my life. In the weeks that followed, life became quieter. Not because my family suddenly changed, but because I finally did. My parents called a few times, never quite apologizing, always circling around the real issue. They spoke about misunderstandings, about how people had judged them unfairly, about how I should have defended the family. I listened politely, but I no longer accepted responsibility for protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. For the first time, their disappointment no longer outweighed my peace. Began celebrating the people who had quietly celebrated me all along. Friends who remembered small details. Co-workers who checked in without expecting anything in return. Neighbors who stopped by with a simple birthday card. They reminded me that family isn't defined by shared blood alone. It's defined by shared effort. The following year, I celebrated my birthday again. The guest list was smaller, but every chair was filled by someone who wanted to be there. There were no forced smiles, no empty promises, and no anxious glances toward the door. As laughter echoed around the table, I realized I hadn't checked my phone. Once, my parents weren't invited, not out of revenge, not out of hatred, simply because trust, once broken enough times, quietly expires. That birthday taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. The people who truly value you never make you compete for a place in their lives. Walking away from those who take you for granted isn't giving up on family, it's refusing to give up on yourself. Some wounds don't heal because someone finally says, "I'm sorry." They heal the day you stop waiting to hear it. And that was the moment my birthday stopped being the day my family abandoned me and became the day I finally chose myself.